United Kuki National Army, UKNA, and its stern warning and analysis. The conflict in Manipur has entered yet another tense phase with the latest statement from the United Kuki National Army, UKNA, a non-SoO armed group operating in the Kuki inhabited territories. The group issued a strong warning declaring capital punishment for any leader, political representative, or influential figure who aligns with what it described as the Meitei State Ideology, or advocates for reintegration of Kukis under the existing Manipur state framework. The group statement, widely circulated in the hills, underscores the growing mistrust between Kukis and Meiteis, and it reiterates UKNA's full support for the demand of separate administration. This announcement, while alarming, is also a reflection of the ongoing ethnic rift and the absence of reconciliation after more than a year of bloodshed and displacement. According to The Hindu, the ethnic clashes that erupted in May 2023 led to the displacement of over 60,000 Kukis from the Imphal Valley into the surrounding hills. Since then, violence has not only deepened but also consolidated political demands for a permanent separation between the two communities. It is in this context that UKNA frames its ideology, that there is no going back to the pre-conflict status quo, and that any attempt by Kuki leaders to compromise with Imphal will be met with the harshest of penalties. In its statement, UKNA asserted that even sitting members of Legislative Assembly, MLAs, from the Kuki community would not be spared if they betray the aspiration of the people. The warning is not directed merely at individuals, but is essentially a public declaration of the organization's political position. As reported by The Print, the central thrust of the Kuki resistance has evolved around the principle of self-rule within one's ancestral land, a position that has hardened as atrocities and grievances have mounted against them. For UKNA, any voice of compromise is seen as an act of sabotage against the collective suffering and sacrifices of the people. This marks a critical departure from earlier Kuki armed movements that were primarily engaged in securing autonomy or recognition within a federal framework. Today, UKNA positions itself as a people-centric revolutionary front committed solely to separate administration. The non-SoO status of UKNA, unlike other Kuki groups currently engaged in suspension of operations agreements with the Government of India, gives the outfit greater leeway to issue uncompromising statements. According to The Telegraph, the SoO mechanism was introduced in 2008 to curb violence and bring Kuki armed groups to the negotiating table. But, with groups like UKNA outside that framework, the discourse is shifting towards absolute rejection of coexistence with the Manipur state apparatus. The ethnic war of 2023-2024 remains central to understanding this hardline shift. The destruction of hundreds of Kuki villages, the torching of churches, and the killings of civilians have left deep scars. As reported by Scroll, many of the survivors in relief camps continue to express that reconciliation is no longer possible because they fear extermination if they ever return to Imphal. In that sense, UKNA's declaration of capital punishment is not just about punishing potential collaborators. It is a warning rooted in the existential fears of the people they claim to represent. UKNA also articulates its ideology in contrast to what it labels as Meitei State Ideology, a phrase it uses to describe the centralized dominance of Imphal over the hills, discriminatory policies, and the perceived attempt to erase tribal land rights. According to The Wire, the Meitei demand for scheduled tribe status and their insistence on retaining control over valley resources are among the most contentious issues fueling the rift. For UKNA, therefore, any Kuki leader supporting such an ideology is tantamount to betraying the historical and present struggle of the Kuki people. The political message is especially sharp when directed toward elected representatives. Kukis currently have a number of MLAs in the Manipur Assembly, though most have refrained from attending sessions in Imphal since the outbreak of violence. UKNA's warning suggests that even symbolic gestures of return to the Valley Assembly would be treated as treason. As highlighted by the Indian Express, this creates a dilemma for Kuki legislators. On one hand, they are constitutionally bound to represent their constituencies, but on the other hand, they face tremendous pressure from armed outfits and their displaced electorate, who see any compromise as betrayal. UKNA's press statement also underscores a broader point. The separation demand is not just a political slogan, but has crystallized into an article of faith among the displaced and marginalized Kukis. As noted by The Hindu, Kuki civil society organizations, student unions, and church bodies have repeatedly reiterated that their people cannot live under Manipur anymore. UKNA's alignment with this sentiment shows how armed groups are drawing legitimacy from the suffering of civilians in relief camps. The issue of capital punishment as a declared penalty is itself telling. While many insurgent groups in India have used threats of violence against collaborators, UKNA's open declaration stands out because it extends even to MLAs and political elites. According to Outlook India, this kind of open threat highlights both the fragmentation of the Kuki movement and the rise of uncompromising factions who believe that deterrence is the only way to preserve the goal of separation. The government's silence on groups like UKNA is another dimension worth analyzing. Security forces have primarily engaged with SoO groups, while considering non-SoO outfits as outlawed. Yet, as reported by The Telegraph, the growing influence of such groups cannot be ignored because they fill the ideological vacuum left by mainstream political negotiations. UKNA represents one such force that is no longer willing to talk about autonomy or special safeguards within Manipur, but only a full administrative separation. The intensity of this demand has grown in tandem with continued instability. Over 60,000 internally displaced persons remain in relief camps with little prospect of return. According to The Hindu, both the centre and the state have failed to find a durable political solution. It is this vacuum that groups like UKNA exploit by presenting themselves as the guardians of Kuki aspirations. In many ways, their warnings are symbolic of the frustration and hopelessness pervading Kuki territories. At the same time, their hardline stance also complicates possibilities for dialogue. According to The Print, the centre has attempted to reassure Kuki groups by engaging in back-channel talks, but outfits like UKNA reject these overtures outright because they see any negotiation short of separation as meaningless. Their rhetoric of capital punishment, though extreme, is thus a reflection of their political worldview that nothing short of separation ensures survival. Critics argue that such positions can push the region deeper into a cycle of violence. As noted by The Wire, history shows that threats against community leaders often fragment societies further, creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. For instance, MLAs or village chiefs who may seek practical compromises could be silenced, leaving only hardline voices to dominate the discourse. This risks further alienating Kukis from the democratic process and could potentially harden the centre's security approach against them. Nevertheless, one cannot ignore that the popularity of groups like UKNA stems from the lived experiences of ordinary people in relief camps, as reported by Scroll. Many camp residents see armed groups as their only line of defense in the absence of credible state protection. In such a setting, the call for punishing collaborators is less about ideology and more about protecting community solidarity from within. The Meitei Kuki faultline remains one of the most intractable issues in India's northeast today. The UKNA's declaration adds another layer of complexity to a situation where both communities now live in total segregation, separated by buffer zones and guarded by central forces. According to The Hindu, reconciliation talks have repeatedly failed because trust has completely eroded. For UKNA, therefore, the only viable solution is separation, and their warning of capital punishment is a way of enforcing discipline within their own ranks. In conclusion, the latest UKNA press statement illustrates the hardening of political positions among Kuki armed outfits. By openly warning against leaders who might compromise, the organization not only asserts its influence, but also reflects the larger sentiment of a displaced and embittered community. According to the Indian Express, unless there is a serious political initiative from New Delhi to address the root causes of the conflict, the hills will continue to echo with such uncompromising calls. For now, the UKNA represents a faction that is unwilling to forgive, forget, or compromise. Disclaimer: this analysis is based on press statements and news reports from credible outlets such as The Hindu, The Indian Express, The Telegraph, Scroll In, Outlook India, The Wire, and The Print. Videos used here are for representational purpose only. Zalengam Media does not endorse or take responsibility for the claims made by armed groups. The content here is purely an analytical narrative meant for informational purposes. Thank you for watching. Please do share this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Zalengam Media.